seat. Get out your Bible and turn to the book of Daniel. Isn't that weird that I am not saying turn to the book of Revelation? Not Revelations. It is never Revelations. It is Revelation. One book. So, there is this theme in literature and in movies that is very, very prevalent, and it actually goes across different genres. So it's not just in one genre. It might be a sci-fi fantasy thing. It might be in the drama. It might be in the action. There's this theme that kind of, you see it littered all over the place in stories. And that theme is this. It is somebody being taken to a foreign place that they don't know. Look at me. A foreign place that they don't know. Being taken away from their home and their family and everything, and being taken someplace else. And while they're there, those people that get them try to shape them and form them, either like the movie Gladiator, for instance, right? This guy is taken from his place and he is taken into this arena, and now he's got to fight and train. There is a book that I just got done reading about 2 months ago called Ender's Game. It's also a movie. It's a sci-fi book movie, and this is the theme of that story, and here's how it goes. There's an 8-year-old boy. His name is Ender. That's what he wants to be called. So his name is Ender, hence the name of the book, Ender's Game, right? And in this thing, it's a sci-fi. In this thing, he is taken at 8 years old, and he's put in this training facility where they basically, these generals train him, they work him, as well as other kids. They try to completely conform this kid into a soldier, into a fighting machine. And really what they want to do is they kind of want to brainwash all the kids so that they fight the same way, they know how to fight. Well, here's what Ender was a special kid. And so Ender was taken at 8 years old from his parents and his family, taken to this facility, never to see his family again. But he refused to go all in with the way the generals tried to shape him and form him into what they wanted him to be. He refused to do that. And so what he did instead is he stayed true to himself, and because he stayed true to himself, he would always fight differently than everybody else, because everybody else would just follow the rules, right? This is what here's the general says we fight, here's how we do it. Well, instead, he decided he was going to do it his own way. And here's what was crazy, is that in the book, and I'm going to ruin it for you, but it was written a long time ago, they have him also do all of these training exercises in a simulator. So he sits in the simulator and he is flying, right? And he's leading another group of people, and they're flying to destroy the aliens who are planning to attack. And so what they're doing is they're trying to get them ready for when the aliens attack. And so the final time they decided he's the best. I know he's not following the rules, but he's the best. And so they put him in a simulator and they put him through the most ridiculous, hard thing he could possibly do. And he wins. He does it. He defeats in the simulator. And then all the generals and stuff start freaking out. They're clapping. They're jumping up and down. And the entire time it wasn't a simulator. Every time they were in a simulator, they were actually fighting the aliens. They just didn't know it. But because he did not get conformed to the way that they were telling everybody to do everything, he saved everyone's life. All right? That theme that we see in a bunch of literatures, that theme that we see in Ender's Game, that theme is true in the book of Daniel. What we're going to do tonight with this series in the book of Daniel, which is broken up into two major sections, okay? The first section is narrative or history. The second section is prophecy. Here's my goal. My goal is to do the history portion before our Christmas series, break with Daniel, do a Christmas series, then pick back up with the prophecy stuff at the beginning of the new year. That's my plan. But what we're going to see tonight is, as we begin the history stuff, is that Daniel and others actually experience what is experienced in the Ender's Game, what's experienced in Gladiator. This theme of taking somebody from the home, their family, their life, removing them out of that situation and putting them in a foreign place with a different language. Can you imagine you being kidnapped tonight from this place, taken to Russia, where you do not speak their language? It's a violent place, worthy of being scared of. And now you have to live your life there for the rest of your life. Can you imagine how afraid you would be? But that's exactly what we're going to see tonight in the book of Daniel. And here's what we're going to see. We're going to look how Daniel stood firm in his faith in the midst of fiery trials. And we're going to be encouraged to do the same. So if you are in the book of Daniel, we're going to read the first 21 verses, which you'll notice is the entire first chapter of the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. And then we will break this thing down and look at it and talk about it. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. And then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youth without blemish, good appearance, skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent, to stand in the king's palace and teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank, and they were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them new names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food, or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigns your food and your drink. For why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants. Put us to the test for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables and water. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the other youth who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants accordingly to what you see. So he listened to them on the matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward looked away, took away their food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel he gave understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them. And among all of them, none were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. First thing I want us to talk about tonight is the captivity of Daniel. Daniel goes into captivity. Now, we got to talk about this a little bit so we understand the history of what is going on, because this is actual history, not only spoken of here in Scripture, but other documents record all of this well outside of Scripture. At the beginning of this book, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, comes to Israel, comes to Jerusalem, and besieges them or destroys it and takes over. Now, you may be wondering, why in the world would God sovereignly allow something like this to happen? Why would God allow the king of Babylon to attack Israel and win? Right? I mean, we read all the stories of Israel always winning. They defeated the Philistines. But here, Israel is completely wiped out, except for those that were taken into captivity, those that were made slaves. Everybody else was killed, and Jerusalem was completely destroyed. The temple was destroyed. Everything was devoured. And you got to be wondering, why would God allow something like this? And make no mistake about it, look at verse 2. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. This was God's doing. God gave Israel to Babylon. God did this. Why? When God gave the law in the Old Testament, do you know what God told Israel? If you obey me and you worship me, I'll bless you. If you disobey me and you worship false gods, you'll be cursed. I will destroy you. And guess what Israel did over and over and over and over again? Abandoned worshiping God and worshiped idols. And God had finally had enough. He had been as patient as he could have been, and he finally had enough. And so God was going to bring judgment down on Israel. God had sent prophets. If you read the book of Isaiah or you read the book of Jeremiah, the whole book of Isaiah and the whole book of Jeremiah is telling Israel, you are going to be wiped out because you would not worship God. Other prophets as well talk about this message of judgment against Israel. And listen to me, everything God said happened exactly like God said it. Now listen to me, it is not because God just predicted the future. Have you ever wondered how God knows the future? You ever thought about that? How does God know the future? It is not because God just predicts what the future is going to be. It is what he does in the future. That's how he knows what's going to happen. Because God does it. God was able to tell Israel, you're going to be wiped out. You're going to be besieged, and the Babylonians are going to take you into captivity. And you know why I know that? Because I'm going to do it. So, Nebuchadnezzar destroys Jerusalem, but he takes some people who were willing to surrender and not fight back. He takes them into captivity. And he decides, though, that I'm going to take some of these young men, these youths, I'm going to take some of these young men, and I'm going to bring them into my palace for the express purpose, look at me, Norman, put your phone on, for the express purpose of conforming them, training them, conforming them, teaching them, brainwashing them, so they become servants in his palace who believe what he believes, who follows the rules he follows, who lives like he lives. He takes teenage boys from the royal family and nobility. These were teenage boys from the tribe of Judah. Okay, we know that's the royal family because that's the tribe that David is from. It is also the tribe that Jesus is from. He takes them, and I'm going to give you a big word, I'm going to define it. The reason why he wants to bring them in is to conform them. He wants them to assimilate. Okay? Assimilate. I'm going to tell you what assimilate means. Assimilate is the process of getting others to adapt and to adjust to another culture or group. It is taking those who are less privileged, in this case the Jewish boys, into part of the privileged culture, which is the Babylonians. So here's what he is doing. He is going to take these young boys, he's going to bring them in, he wants them to assimilate to their Babylonian pagan mentality. He wants them to forget what they were, forget who you are, forget the God you worship, come here and assimilate to being a Babylonian pagan. That's what he wanted. And so he was going to do three things to try to get this to happen. Number one, he was going to teach them Babylonian literature. So he was going to educate them based on the Babylonian way of education. He wasn't going to use the Hebrew Bible. He wasn't going to use the Torah, the 5 books of the Bible, the first 5 books of the Bible. He wasn't going to use that as education. He was going to use their Babylonian pagan. He was going to teach them Chaldean language. Number 2, he was going to change their names. Daniel becomes Belteshazzar. Hananiah becomes Shadrach. Mishael becomes Meshach. Azariah becomes Abednego. We'll talk about their names in just a minute. And he wanted to make them eat the king's food. All of this, listen to me carefully, all of this was manipulation to get these guys to become Babylonian pagans. I cannot say that enough times. His motivation was to get these Jewish boys who worship Yahweh into his palace, change their names, re-educate them, make them eat the king's food, which was a way of manipulating them, so that they become Babylonian pagans. That's what he wanted. So Daniel becomes one of these that has to assimilate. The second thing I want us to see is the faithfulness of Daniel. The faithfulness of Daniel. Daniel was determined not to be conformed to the pagan ways of the Babylonians. Now, make no mistake, guys, were they taken into Babylon? Did they have to go to Babylon? Yes, it's not a trick question. Did they have to go to Babylon? Yes. So guess what? They had to live in that culture. They did not have a choice. They had to live in that culture. But Daniel was determined not to become like the people in the culture. So he had no choice to be in the culture. He was taken into captivity. He had to be in the culture. What he was not going to do is become part of that culture. He was going to be distinguished. He and his 3 friends, Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah, they continued to use their Hebrew names with one another. You know how I know that? Because Daniel is the writer of the book of Daniel, and throughout Daniel, except for one story, throughout Daniel, he refers to himself as Daniel, not as Belteshazzar. Do you know why? Let's talk about this for a minute. Do you know why the name change was so important? You know why Nebuchadnezzar wanted the names changed? Because what the names meant. All 4 of these names had a shortened version of one of the names of God in Hebrew. Daniel and Mishael both end in El, don't they? Okay? El was a shortened form of the word Elohim, which was a reference to God. Let me tell you what Daniel's name means. Daniel's name means God is judge. Not just any God. The Jewish God is judge. Mishael means who is like God. Hananiah doesn't end in El. Azariah doesn't end in El. But you know what it ends in? You hear that? Azariah. Did you catch that? Hananiah. It is the shortened form of the word Jehovah. Let me tell you what their names means. Hananiah's name means God is gracious. Azariah's name means God is my helper. Do you know why Nebuchadnezzar had one of their names changed? Because he wanted them to forget who they were. I don't want you to remember, Daniel, what your name means and who you are. So I want to change your name. I want to basically change your identity. I want to change who you are. So I'm going to change your name. But do you know what? Even though the Babylonians called them Belteshazzar, called them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stayed true to their identity, and among themselves, they still called themselves by their Hebrew names. Daniel and his friends also refused to eat the king's rich food. Now, there's probably two reasons for this. Listen carefully. Probably two reasons why they refused to eat the king's food. Number one, it probably was not what we call kosher. What I mean by that is there are dietary laws that the Jews had to live by, and the Babylonians didn't live by those. So they probably weren't making any distinction between pork and beef. Well, they weren't supposed to eat pork. That was against the rules. And so part of the reason why they could not eat this food is because it would defile them, because it was against their dietary laws. But also, the king was doing this to manipulate them. The king was like, hey, come on into my palace. I'll educate you. I'll give you the best food. You can eat what I eat. You can drink what I drink. Just follow what I say to do. He's manipulating them. He's trying to win them over. Right, boys? He's trying to win them over. And they're having none of it. And so they say, listen, we can't eat this. We cannot eat this. So you just give us vegetables and water for 10 days. You let all the other people, all the other young men in the palace, okay, all the others that have been brought in here, you let them eat all they want of what the king eats. You just give us vegetables and water. And in 10 days, you come back and check on us and you see who's doing better. You see who's in better shape. You see who's fatter. That word fat doesn't mean like put on fat. It means to see who is stronger, who is more powerful, who is in better shape. So while the non-Jewish boys were given food and wine by the king, Daniel, Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah were given nothing but vegetables and water for 10 days. And here's the third thing I want us to see. The preservation of Daniel. I want you to see this, guys. Verse 17, look at it. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. God blesses these boys for their faithfulness. Let me tell you something. Listen, I know we got a small group, but if you will grab a hold of the things that I'm saying tonight, change your life forever. Do you know how many people have sat in these chairs? Okay? The very chairs you're sitting in have sat in these chairs and wanted their life to be blessed by God, but they were not willing to be faithful in order to get that blessing. Then their life goes to hell, and they wonder why. There is blessings that come with faithfulness. And we can't just live any way we want to and think that blessings are just going to pour down and our life is going to go good. No, if you're a child of God, when you are unfaithful, God has it go bad for you. Why? To get you back where you need to be. If you will live faithfully for the Lord, I'm not saying everything will go great and perfect for you, but you will miss out on all the pitfalls that other people fall into because you've decided you're going to be faithful to Jesus. These guys decide, I'm going to be faithful to Jesus. I'm going to follow Yahweh no matter what. And guess what happens? The Lord blesses them. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is not the only one who notices it. Because after 10 days, guess what happens? They come back after 10 days, and the boys that ate the vegetables and the water are in better shape than the ones that ate the wine and the king's food. Again, they didn't have any protein. They weren't eating protein. They were eating vegetables. And here's why I say that. Listen carefully. Because this is a work of God that they were in this great shape. That there was a noticeable difference in 10 days. Just 10 days. Between Daniel and his friends and the rest. Nebuchadnezzar also found, look at verse 19. The king spoke with them, and among all of them, when he says he spoke with them, he spoke to all the young men that had been trained. And among all of them, there was none found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. After 3 years of going through this assimilation process, this brainwashing process, Nebuchadnezzar looks at the guys who stay true to themselves, stay true to their God. And Nebuchadnezzar says, they're the best. These 4 guys are the best. They're not even buying into everything we're trying to sell them. They're not eating our food. I know they're calling each other by their Hebrew names. I hear it. Yet, they're the best that there is. God was being faithful to them. He was blessing them. Finally, look at verse 21. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. Now, this is important. Okay? This is important. It may not seem like a big deal. That verse may not seem like a big deal. It is a big deal. Israel was told by God, you are going to go into captivity for 70 years. Okay? So Daniel was taken probably at the age of 13, 14, or 15. Okay? So don't think Daniel was like 22, 23 years old. He was not a man. All right? See this row of boys right here? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about this age. Being taken to a land they do not know and being told by a king, you got to assimilate to our pagan ways. And those 4 guys said, no, we will not. And listen to this. Daniel made it through all 70 years. Do you know who the king was that let Israel go back to their homeland? Cyrus. That means Daniel came over at the beginning of the 70 years and lived all 70 years. Stop, boys. Come on. Lived all 70 years and made it to King Cyrus. Listen, Nebuchadnezzar was king, Babylonian king. Darius was Babylonian king. But then Cyrus was a Persian king who destroyed Babylon, who came in and took over Babylon. So Daniel, this 13-year-old boy from Jerusalem, is taken captive. He outlasts Nebuchadnezzar. He outlasts Darius. And when Cyrus comes in, he's an old, wise man now, right? He's this old man who has been there through all these other kings. Daniel is preserved. Why is he preserved? Because he was faithful. He was faithful to Yahweh. He was faithful to God, and God blessed him. Now, everybody looking at me. You don't need to look at your text anymore. You don't need to look at your notes anymore. I want you to listen to me. Israel was the people of God. They were the chosen nation. I'm going to wait till everyone's looking at me. Don't take your eyes off of me for the next 5 minutes. They were called to be faithful no matter what. Yes, they were in a foreign land now, surrounded by pagans, but even in the midst of being surrounded by pagans, they were called by God to be faithful to Him. But I want to put our story tonight in a larger context. I want to apply it to us. One of the most influential books on theology ever written is a book entitled The City of God by the African theologian Augustine, written in the 5th century. The theme of this book is that the world, human beings, are split into 2 cities. There's an earthly city that is consumed with love of self. And then there's a spiritual or a heavenly city that is consumed with love for God. And every human being on the planet is in one of those two cities. You're either in the city, an earthly city and a lover of self, or you are a part of the heavenly city and you are a lover of God. Those are the only two cities that there are. And this is a perfect description of what is going on in our chapter tonight. Daniel is a part of God's holy city. The city, listen, it doesn't matter where he is. Whether he's in Israel or whether he's in Babylonian captivity, guess what? He's a part of God's city. And he was to live as if he is a part of God's city no matter where he is. And do you know what happens today? Exactly what happens then? If you are a Christian, you are a part of God's city. In fact, the Bible calls you the New Jerusalem. You're actually called the New Jerusalem. A picture of you is the city. You are the city of God. And we live in a culture, all right, that is a part of the earthly city. The city of self. And do you know what the city of self wants every single one of you Christians to do? To assimilate to them. They want you to act like them and talk like them and believe like them and live like them. They want to morph you and conform you into their image. Just like Nebuchadnezzar wanted to do to Daniel and his friends. Our culture wants to do that to you. We don't have to look very far. One thing that I was thinking that we want to do, and maybe I'll do it before we're done, is I was going to have cards, and I was just going to have you write down ways that our culture tries to get you to live sinfully. Public schools teach evolution. What a bunch of nonsense. There ain't nothing scientific about evolution. They force down our throats the idea that sexuality is just what you make it. Nonsense. Listen to me. Our culture wants to conform you and morph you into its image. And you've got to be like Daniel. I've got to be like Daniel. And say, you know what? I know that I'm living among this culture and I can't escape it. And I'm not trying to flee and get out of it. But while I'm in the midst of it, I'm going to be different. And you're going to see it. You're going to see that I'm different. You're going to see that I'm not going to conform to what you want me to be. Isn't that funny that even the culture that we live in, everybody says that, right? Be your own person. Don't conform. Well, listen, if you do everything they say, you ended up conforming anyway. Be your own person. Okay, I don't believe homosexuality is okay. No, you can't be your own person. Be like, wait, what? Be your own person. Have an open mind. Okay, I don't believe in evolution. You are so ignorant. Wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to have an open mind. I thought I was supposed to be my own person. You see the hypocrisy? They want you to be like them. They want you to live like them. And so here's what we have to decide tonight. And listen to me. These guys were 13 and 14 years old. So don't tell me you can't make your mind up tonight. You can't decide tonight. Everyone in this room, no matter how old we are, we can decide tonight. Are we going to be with Daniel? Are we a part of the city of God? Are we the New Jerusalem? You too can decide at whatever age you are. Decide tonight that you're going to be faithful to God, that you're going to submit to Jesus as Lord and Savior and refuse to be conformed, but you're going to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and you're going to present your body as a living sacrifice to Almighty God. Romans 12:1. Be ye not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice.
question I leave us tonight with is this: are we